Okay, here we are. Hi, everybody. I know a lot of people will be watching this on a recording. So hello to everybody, wherever you are and whenever you're watching this. Right now, it's the morning time for us. And we're happy to be here chatting with everybody and having this discussion about finding wisdom during times of chaos, not only for ourselves as clinicians, but helping our clients do the same. And the reason or the way that this webinar kind of came to fruition is how many of them do. Catherine and I talk about something and then we identify it as, yeah, this is really a problem. And then we go, let's do a webinar on it. So that's how we got here. Catherine and I are on the same consultation team. And I know there are a lot of people in this training who are new to DBT or interested in DBT. And so for anyone who doesn't know, the role of the consultation team is really to support one another in being able to do the treatment in a way that's effective and keeping one another motivated to do the treatment. So to enhance our skills, that's something that we work on in team, like to help our clients get better, but also to keep us motivated. And one of the themes that had been coming up, not only in our consultation team, but also in our discussions with one another, is just how over the past 2 years or so, the work of being not only a therapist, but also a DBT therapist has become a lot more challenging. And part of that is because of the times and the things that we've collectively gone through over the past 2 years as a community, as a country, as a world, and the universe, all of those other things. So those things are going on. And the hard thing is that those things are happening to our clients, but they're also happening to us. And so our ability to hold space is just different than it was prior to these last 2 years. And then the bags that our clients are coming into our sessions with are a lot fuller than they were before. And so one of the questions that was coming up, at least for me in consultation and in discussions, was like, man, my clients are coming in with some things and I feel like I don't even know where to begin. And on the one hand, I know the facts show me that I actually am a very skilled therapist. I know a lot of things to do with clients, but in those moments when clients are coming in with such heavy traumas, it's as if they can't get back on their footing because like one thing after another comes. So there's that going on. And then on a parallel, like train track almost, we're going through harder things as well. You know, Catherine and I were just talking about how yesterday I came home to a almost $3,000 medical bill that I wasn't expecting. And then it took 2 hours plus to just navigate why the bill came and how the coding was wrong and all of these things. And it's like, we're trying to keep up with life as life gets faster and it feels more intense for ourselves. And then we're trying to also do that for our clients. And it's just really challenging. And so that is the reason that we've kind of arrived at this place. We want to share a couple of tools that we use to help us stay in a place where we're inspired and where we feel we can get in touch with the wisdom that we have within to be able to resource out to our clients and to help them find that within themselves as well.
That was a very, very good intro.
Thank you.
Shannon.
It felt good. Thank you.
You're on. I mean, I think like what's interesting, you know, your story about the coming home to this medical bill. I spent multiple sessions in the last few weeks with clients who are facing like they've got medical problems that may not be life-threatening, may not be like, you know, in other contexts may not be like taking over their life. But there's this reality that then they're trying to navigate a medical system that's actually really difficult to navigate, that takes time to the degree that it almost feels like they could spend a whole workday or even multiple work days navigating it. And these are things that like come up. So I go into session and I'm trying to help somebody, you know, maybe they're depressed and we're trying to do like behavioral activation, or we're trying to collect some more positive experiences in their life. And they have this medical problem that's just kind of lingering, but then it's like the amount of work it takes to problem solve how to help somebody actually navigate that system it feels like it could take every session. And it's a big deal because it's actually these really real life problems that are not going away quickly. And then, as you said, like then, you know, if you're the therapist and you hang up from your session or leave your office or something, and then you go and have to deal with your own version of that, it's pretty mind-boggling. Like, how does one actually stay sort of stable through it and not lose hope? And I feel like I mean, the first thing I want to say about this, which is not in our notes, but just came to me right now, is the fact that like hope has a way of being in flux as well. Like I think oftentimes we get stuck up in the idea that like we have to stay almost like positive, as if this is what it means to be hopeful, like having this positive outlook, like assuming everything's going to work out well. And I'm not sure that that's the case. I mean, I think in many cases, I don't know that we could like hang our hats on that idea that things are going to work out well, or they're going to always get better or easier. But I do think that there's a lot about what we offer as therapists and like what it looks like to do healing, that has less to do with how everything works out, but more to do with like cultivating a stance and a mindset of acceptance and sort of like equanimity in the face of things that we know may not work out very well. Like, I don't know that in my lifetime, the medical system is going to get easier to navigate or like be simple at some point in the US. Like, I just don't know if that's the case. And so I do think that there is this difference between like holding on to hope, which I would equate with in some cases like this very optimistic, like excessive positivity that may fly in the face of many people's experience.
Yeah. And on the other side of that too, I think one of the other things Catherine and I were talking about prior to jumping on was it's also really easy to swing in the other direction. So, there's the side of we can push ourselves to be hopeful. We can try and push that in our clients. And usually that doesn't work out super well when we're just kind of like ignoring the fact that everything's turning to shit. But we're like, just stay with it, just be positive. Like that doesn't feel good and feels really invalidating and it's really frustrating. But then on the other side of the pendulum, we can swing to the place of like, this isn't fair. Things never work. See, this never goes the way that I want it to, and get into the mindset of blaming, pointing fingers, staying stuck, and really just adding and contributing to our misery. One of the things that you said before was like, I don't know if times now are more chaotic than they've ever been in history, but I know that's what we've been talking about is like, I don't know, this feels harder than I think it probably ever was for anybody since the beginning of man-time. And you're right, that's probably not true. And yet here we are in these moments, like these are the cards that we have, like, there is no other reality. And so there is this initial level of deep acceptance that has to come with, okay, here's what we've woken up to today. Here's what's being served up. And now how are we going to relate to it? So instead of having this target with our clients and with ourselves to say, I want to get to a place where they're now feeling hopeful and remembering that hope, it in itself is a changing state. It's something that we come into, and it's something that we have to be intentional around cultivating for our clients as well, for ourselves. Like there is a recipe that gets us to that place. And without having intentional awareness to that, it's likely that we're just going to push towards one side or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what's interesting when you talk about like the looking back through history, because there's been very chaotic times and consistently so, and this is not new. And then I also think about like in DBT, we teach the transactional model, the biosocial model, which it supposes that there is this interplay between people, individuals, and the environment at large. And I think this is always at play in such a way that we have, there is like kind of increase and escalation and development of problems. So like you have, a person or even like a community of people who have certain vulnerabilities, like there are things that they don't have access to, or they have, and it could be on a biological level, but I think often right now I see it more on a systems level, but there's just like a lack of access to resources and support. And then you've got an environment that's highly invalidating. And let's just be clear, I think the environment that exists in the internet in this world right now is like marked by invalidation of all kinds of people, both individually and groups of people and populations of people at large. And then it has this effect of like actually changing the next sort of rendition of how people experience their world. So like they might have had limited access, the environment comes in and it is an incredibly invalidating experience for people, and somehow manages to even highlight and pronounce further the person's own like vulnerabilities, and pushes and like puts even more weight on them that they have to like carry, and the burden that they have to sort of manage. And it makes it really difficult, I think. So it sort of like compounds on itself over time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like that, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning about like, and I think of the example that comes up when oftentimes in DBT, when we're teaching transactional models to clients, it's like the snowball is going down the hill, and as it goes down the hill, it collects more snow. And so it gets bigger, and because it's bigger, it goes faster, and it gets bigger, faster. And that just kind of keeps going. And so with the environment being in this place that is like highly sensitive, very reactive, highly invalidating, then everyone's fuse tends to get shorter, and they tend to get activated by less. And so again, now you have human and human, therapist and client, walking into session with probably shorter fuses, higher reactivity, and then showing up to kind of say like, okay, let's work on what you were working on. But again, you're unpacking the suitcase that's like full of fireworks. And so it's just really hard to know where to begin. It's hard to know where to go. Even if you have 10 plus years of training, you'll find yourself in your seat kind of like, I don't even know where to begin today. And, you know, I think like the urge to just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks is a lot higher. And then clients don't get better, so we feel more hopeless. And I just see that transaction playing out in a lot of different places. And so I know the idea of not becoming polarized is really inherent in DBT. And that's really like the theme of what we want to talk about today. But I know, you know, going off of not really necessarily anything we planned about in our notes, but the idea that all of this comes first from therapist mindfulness and awareness of these things, because really we can't cultivate these skills again without intention, but also without recognizing first, like, hey, there's a skill deficit here for us therapists in this area. So before I can even call on skills that DBT has kind of set out for me, I have to be able to sit back in my chair and kind of notice that these things are going on. Because if not, then I'm just kind of that moving snowball that continues to go and grow and get reactive and hopeless and all of those things.
I want to share, I think I'm going to actually just do this on a little whiteboard. Are people able to see this whiteboard?
I think so. I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So I think about it this way, Shailene, you just mentioned like mindfulness for the therapist. And I think about in DBT, those of you that are familiar are probably familiar with the skill Wise Mind, which we're going to talk about more throughout our time today. But whoops, that is not what I intended to paste. Not sure where that came from. And we're going to talk more about Wise Mind. But one of the things that I think about with within DBT, we've got what skills and how skills. This is how we practice mindfulness. And I want to share a little bit of a different take, or at least how I think about these. So I'm going to just show this little Venn diagram, if I can get Zoom to cooperate with me. Well, it's not going to move, but oh, there it goes. Okay. So if you imagine in this little diagram here, in the middle, we've got what I'm going to label as Wise Mind. Like this is the part that I feel like this middle, like where they all overlap here, is where we're in our most sort of centered states, right? Where we can understand things in reality just as they are, without an excess of panic that might arise, like when we start looking out at the world and thinking about all the problems and panic starts to arise, or without this like excessive hope that's sort of like more in that category of like toxic positivity that's like, oh, everything's going to be fine, when actually it's really kind of detached from reality. And so Wise Mind, I'm going to just propose is sort of the state in which we can hold both truths about the reality that we exist in. And then there's some things that can threaten to pull us out of it. And those things, I'm going to list them as sort of the opposite of what the how skills in DBT are. So for those of you that may not be familiar with how and what skills in DBT, let us know, because we've got some resources that might be helpful for you to learn those. But you don't need to know them to follow along, I hope. But one of the things that can kind of pull us out of this balanced state is being judgmental. When we get into this frame of mind where we're like, everything is bad or everything is good, like when I just described like getting pulled out of a state of equanimity, we get pulled into either thinking it's all terrible and we panic, or it's all going to be fine and good and we, hold on to hope. But neither of them are really based in actually what we're seeing and witnessing in the moment and understanding. So if we can notice that those things are rooted in judgment, like an evaluation of what's actually happening rather than an observation of just the facts about it. If we can let go of judgment, then we can come back to a balanced state. But when we hold on to those judgments and treat them as fact, we get pulled out of this state that can sort of like stay connected to reality in the moment. And then another thing that can pull us out is being right. I think being right is really particularly difficult because sometimes we are right. I mean, there's lots of times that I've been right about something, but when I get stuck in being right, then my tendency, and I don't think I'm alone in this, my tendency is to see how everybody else is wrong. And it doesn't actually move towards any sort of like
resolve
any sort of solution, like evolution towards like, how do we work with this reality? It just becomes a stalemate of like me being right and you being wrong. And people do this in all ways in our world right now. I mean, I feel like at least in the United States, I see this on a daily basis, like as people argue over all kinds of political things, or and within the professional world, I see this all the time. Like it's just a polarizing mindset to cling to being right rather than commitment to being effective in how you communicate with other people and how you interact in the world around you. So being right and being stuck on being right it has this way of pulling us out of this this state of equanimity. And then the other thing that I think can happen is distraction. When we have distraction and we let our minds get distracted and we sort of like focus on things that are sort of like, I mean, present distractions, things that are like right in front of us all the time, but they're things that actually almost like keep us in a more numb state of mind where we're not actually thinking about or processing some of the pain of reality in the moment. And instead, I can't tell you how much time I spend doing crossword puzzles. And sometimes I think, oh my gosh, like my crossword puzzles are so fun because they don't make me upset. They don't make me feel like, oh no, what about the world? But they pull me out of reality for this bit of time, which is a nice relief, but like it makes it actually hard to stay balanced and wise when I am in reality. So I just think, when we think about the mindfulness skills, at least in DBT, they really are the opposite of these. They're about letting go of judgment or holding a non-judgmental state. Being effective, like choosing to let go of being right and the anger that comes with being right when you know you're right and others are wrong, letting go of that and practicing, ways of being effective with other people and being able to communicate more effectively, and then letting go of distractions and the ways that our mind pulls us out of reality and coming right back into what is happening here, what is happening now, what am I feeling here, what am I feeling now, and what is needed right here and right now. I don't know if that's a helpful picture. I hope I'm not confusing
It's helpful for me. I mean, I think about like, what are the forces on the outside that are really driving these, I guess like almost different, I don't know if different states of mind is the right word, but like things that hijack our experience of reality in the present moment as one that's like not tainted, like experiencing reality as it is in this like more pure sense without any other things kind of clouding up the water. And I think of those outside forces going, again, I just keep going back to the transaction between like, if a bunch of people on the outside of me, around me, or even on like the internet are saying that they are right, which indicates that I'm wrong, I'm going to feel more strongly pulled to stay in that polarized place of, oh, but no, I really think that I'm right and you're actually wrong. And it's going to be, it's like a great breeding ground for judgment to grow, because then my opinions come into it around why you're right and why I'm wrong, and how your stance on being wrong is actually so wrong that you don't make any sense, and that, you know, you shouldn't even be allowed to post anymore. Like those kinds of things. That's a perfect environment for that stuff to cook up more in. And then it's a great environment to have me just not want to deal with any of that anymore at all. And so I find that I'm able to find distractions that can take me out of it. Like Catherine talks about crossword puzzles. I like watching a lot of reality TV. And so it's great. And at the same time, I find it really hard to get myself out of that, and like feeling times where I know it doesn't feel good and I know I should pull myself out because I'm staying up later than intended. And then that impacts my sleep for the next day. And so, but then all of that just cooks up a really great situation where I want to do it again later because I'm so fed up with everything that I really don't want to be experiencing the present moment. But that becomes really problematic because it makes it really hard for us to get out of that cycle. And the same thing, I think, is like what's going on with our clients a lot of the time. But when we're both hijacked into that state, it's really difficult for us to get effective. And if it's really difficult for us to get effective, it's a lot harder to stay hopeful with them.
For sure. Yeah. And I think like when you say both hijacked, like I just imagine there's so many times in my sessions where it's easy because in my personal life, if I get overwhelmed by a problem and I cope with being overwhelmed by a problem by distracting, or I cope with it by getting really judgmental and just kind of fueling anger, like, why did other people do this? Or, you know, how stupid are they that they did? Then how likely is it that when I'm in session and I'm encountering a really difficult problem, that the residue of that sort of way of processing problems is going to show up in my session? So I think it's hard, but I think it is imperative for therapists to really be practicing these things in their personal lives as well as in their sessions, like actually practicing finding non-judgmental ways of understanding complex problems and finding ways to let go of being right and actually work with the problem as it is and figure out how to navigate that and staying engaged even when the urge to distract and the reinforcement for being distracted is so high. I mean, I can't tell you how reinforcing it is to finish a good crossword puzzle. It's just a fabulous thing, but I'm not sure it helps me be a better therapist or a better
like human or yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're talking a lot about mindfulness. We're talking about mindfulness in terms of DBT, though, you know, it's not like DBT invented mindfulness. It kind of just came up with this different way to present it. And I think for a lot of the reasons that we're discussing today really made it an inherent part of the treatment in DBT. Again, not just for clients, but also for therapists. One of the things that I really appreciate about DBT, and it's interesting because at this point I've been trained in DBT for so long, I forget that like there are plenty of other modalities out there. I just forget because I think of everything in DBT terms, but I just find it so incredibly helpful, the way in which DBT prescribes that therapist and client both need to be doing this kind of work. Like this isn't, hey, client, you're going to go try these mindfulness strategies and this is going to help you stay hopeful, stay inspired, and be able to solve your problems when you feel like the waves keep knocking you down. But therapists as well also has to be practicing these because of all of the reasons that we talked about. Like it would be really naive of us to think that we could go into session and really have this like protective screen up and just think that nothing from the client is going to impact us, or that anything that's going on in our lives is going to seep out into our sessions, kind of like you're talking about, Catherine. So I just wanted to highlight that even within these skill practices, just having a therapy model that supports practicing what you preach and what you teach is also really important. But I really like it because of that too.
Agreed. I think the other thing that we wanted to talk about today that I think is a critical part, I mean, it's like hand in hand with mindfulness, is thinking more broadly about dialectics and how dialectics can inform us in this time. Because I think mindfulness is a part of that, but it sort of is a part within the context of this broader reality where we can sort of understand that the world is in a constant state of flux, like things are always changing and evolving, and we are changing and evolving within it, and we are part of the process of change and evolution broadly in the world. And so if we don't acknowledge all of that with mindfulness, then we have we run the risk of just sort of like mindlessly going through that in a way that's like not very helpful. So Shailene, you want to share that handout? This is a handout. We'll send this out to you all. This is just a version. So in the Linehan Skills Manual, there is a handout that talks about ways of being, or practicing being and thinking dialectically. And these bullet points are mostly taken from that. But it's just a thing that I've been thinking a lot about, is like, how am I doing at being dialectical in this world that is, at its core, like it fits within dialectics. Like there's always these opposing realities that are kind of always like shifting and moving and influencing each other. And it's all happening there, but am I aware of it? Am I paying attention to it? And am I engaging in this dialectical world in a way that is really helpful and working and is like nourishing me as well as the other people around me? So the way that you can use this, if you're interested, and this might be, we could spend just a few minutes working on it together, but each of these 4 boxes is one of the ways of practicing being dialectical from that handout. And what I might encourage you to do is look at this little bullseye, and for each of the quadrants, you might just imagine, like, where are you? Do you feel like, hey, I'm doing this all the time, every day, like I kind of live it? You might put yourself close to the bullseye. But maybe if this is an area that you feel like, I'm not doing this very much, like, so we'll look at the first quadrant here, embracing complex realities. How often do I actually look for what's being left out of something? Or do I instead tend to think like, I know everything, like I look at a problem, or I look at, and whether it's a political issue, whether it's a problem with a particular client, or whether it's a personal problem that you're looking at, do you find yourself sometimes thinking that you have all of the truth about it, or you understand it fully, and maybe the follow-up to that is that others don't? And so if that's where you're at, you might put yourself further out from the bullseye, or figuring out ways to balance opposites. Like, I find this to be, one of the trends that I've noticed when we think about chaotic times right now with my clients, is that I have a lot of clients who've really lost social support systems because their families are sort of polarized or divided based on, opposing beliefs about the pandemic, or about political issues, or things like that. And so where they used to have some social support or some connection, there's less of that, because it's just like, it's this evolution of things where opposing realities, I think a lot of times, at least in my circle, I think people really struggle to hold opposing realities, or to be able to hold them with, some sort of like interest in finding what's valid in the other person's view, and to not be quick to shut down around it, or in the presence of an opposing view. So again, like, these are things you can kind of assess, like, where am I with this? Like, am I tolerant when I'm in the presence of someone with a different point of view? Like, can I sort of stay on both feet, or am I inclined to kind of like shut down? Like, I can't stand it when I'm around people who really see things differently, or in a situation that's really opposing. And where do I fall on that? And is it something, you might ask yourself too, like, is it something that you are willing to consider, increasing your dialectical stance and embracing complex realities? And then we've got this other quadrant to the right, being aware of the transactional nature of change. Like, I think this is when this, I think, is like, when people talk about times getting even more chaotic right now, I think this is what we're witnessing, is that it is transactional. Like, the more that the more noise there is around particular experiences that a person has, the more they're attuned to it, the more they're paying attention to it. And the more that they actually start to see more and more of the veil lifting of like how bad it really is. And it's very painful when it's happening. And so we want to pay attention to actually like, what is our influence in our own experience of that? And what are the ways that we could influence it in a different direction so it's not as painful, or that we might actually be able to influence our realities in a way that improve our experience of reality. And part of that is like this last bullet point here is remembering that all things are caused, which I feel like is really hard to do, because actually we don't always have the privilege to understand the causes of reality. We have oftentimes a limited perspective where we only see the outcomes, like what the consequence of things are, but we can't understand the root of those causes. And so it's a difficult thing to recognize that actually, even when we don't understand or we can't name them, things are caused. So a practice that I've often had to do, especially when I really struggle with some part of reality, is I say to myself, like, oh, I have a little mantra of everything is as it should be. And really, like, the heart of this for me is that everything, if things could be different in this moment, if the causes were in place for things to be different in this moment, they would be. And so when I say everything is as it should be, it's not that I think it's how I want it to be or how anyone might want it to be, or that it's right, that it should be this way, as in it's right that it's this way, but rather that actually the causes for it to be different were never put in place. And when I recognize that the causes for it to be different were never put in place, and therefore it's not different, then I have the opportunity to think, well, could I be part of new causes? Could I be part of a potential new way of thinking or new way of being in the world that could create some change? So I don't know how helpful this is for people, but this is where I find myself having to kind of keep coming back to, like, what is my influence in the world? What is the transaction? What are the many different transactions that I'm a part of at any given moment? What are the connections that I have with other people in the world? Like, what is the way in which I'm, like, I think about big social problems even that my clients are facing and people that I'm not working with, but I see around are facing. And I think about how those problems are, they aren't facing just one person or even one population of people. They are impacting all people in really negative ways. And when I start to see the way that we're all connected, it's even more imperative to be part of the transaction in a positive way, rather than, you can't like disconnect yourself and act as if, like, if it doesn't affect me, then it's not my problem. I'm kind of on like a whole soapbox here, so
I know. I'm just like, this is really great. And I'm applying it to this medical situation that I still have to make phone calls about today because it wasn't solved yesterday. But I think about like the moment where you talked about all things are caused. So I'm tracing it back to somebody put the wrong code in. And like, that's a pretty easy thing to do, to put the wrong code in, especially if I think of whoever this person is living in these times that I'm living in that are very chaotic. And, this person probably has a lot of things going on and all that other stuff. Like, I can start to increase my compassion for this person, for the world, for myself, and kind of just be like, oh, look, and how when we laughed this morning about the Zoom thing not working, it's like, oh, of course it didn't work. Like, you can kind of sit back and take it a little bit more lightly. Whereas yesterday when I got the bill in my hands, I was like firing on all cylinders and going on and on about how we can't eat out anymore because we have this medical bill. Like, it was just really going off into some far off tangent. And I think it's really easy to do all of that stuff. But when I come back to, in order for this to have gone differently, something in the equation would had to have changed. And so on a very like surface level, I can think, well, someone needed to put the right code in and then I wouldn't be in this position. There's truth to that. But in order for that person to put the right code in, things in their life and the transactions that they're experiencing with their own environment would have had to have been different. And I don't have any control over that, but I do have control over how I respond to it. And I think with the shorter fuse yesterday, when I first received that, my instinct was just to, I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to pay it off, and, and that's going to be it. And I didn't do that. And instead I went down this rabbit hole and investigated and asked a lot of questions, and actually experienced a lot of really kind people in the process that really helped me to stay grounded in those times, even though it was still a really long and frustrating ordeal, because my interaction with each of them was one that was like, felt very kind and curious in both of our regards. And so I think the nicer I was in approaching them, the nicer they were in wanting to help me and move me through the process. And so that helps me to feel hopeful about it. Whereas if you skipped earlier into that tape of yesterday, when I first received it, there wasn't, those feelings weren't there. I was feeling very polarized, very angry. I felt very like victimized of the medical system and the world and all of these other things. And so I think that's the space of opportunity that we really have to influence ourselves. And then that, again, like, it makes it so much easier to help our clients make movement from that place, because it's not just, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z, client. And if you're not doing that, then you're not going to get better. And so here we are. Like, it's just really not that easy. I also was thinking, as you were speaking about the idea of dialectical influence, which isn't something that we talk about, but that's really what transactions are, dialectical influence being a behavioral strategy, right? And so if this happened a couple weeks ago. So for anyone who missed that, I was in a conference a couple weeks ago, luckily in Hawaii. It was wonderful. And I went out to dinner with a lot of people that I, was meeting for the first time. And I remember having a conversation with somebody. We were talking about all of the, like airline problems, lost luggage, cancellations. You used to get food on a plane. You don't get food on a plane anymore. They're always late. So we're talking about all of these problems. And this one person, we were talking about the problem where they oversell flights. And as soon as you get to flights, they're spending all this time trying to find somebody to not be on the flight. Like, do we have any volunteers and all that stuff? And so we're talking about that. And then we're talking about changing flights. And I remember this woman said, I found that being nice just goes a long way. Like, when I'm nice to people, it really goes a long way. And she talked about how she had a really late flight and she was on her layover and she noticed there was an earlier flight, and she just went up and said, "Hey, like, how's your day going? I'm sure this is so stressful. I saw there's an earlier flight. If you have any extra seats, I'm happy to get on that one." And they were like, "Yeah, let me see what I can do for you." And on the one hand, I thought, that's interesting. Your strategy around, the damaged system of air and travel and all of that is to be nice. But then when you really think about it, that's a behavioral strategy. It's dialectical influence, right? Where her kindness and her attention and her curiosity and respect for the other person likely opened a container for her to receive that back. And she was a lot more effective in getting what she needed because she got on an earlier flight. She had a shorter layover. And those are things that might not have happened otherwise. And so when I think about dialectical influence as a behavioral strategy, think about your interaction with your clients and how being dialectical will support you in supporting them to move forward in their goals outside of the therapy office. So that was a long-winded answer of like, yes, I find this helpful in what you're saying.
Yeah. And even just hearing that story, I feel like, again, going back to complex realities, like, I mean, dialectics is going to suppose that there is no absolute truth. So like, there are some situations in which kindness is the influence that's needed to change the transaction. And there are some interactions where being really direct and really, and in some cases, even confrontational is going to be what's needed. So it's sort of like, we have to learn how to live in a reality where we can't pin anything down and say, this is the answer. Like, just be nice and everybody will get along. Like, that's just not true. But if you don't say, be nice in some situations, then you're going to end up not having a great influence in how things go. You have to be able to like hold all of this without holding on to any of it. And I think it's a hard thing to do. I find it hard. I mean, I'm always like, dang it, like, why can't it just be like, why can't I just have one answer that's going to just keep working for me for like the rest of my life and for the rest of humanity? Like, can't we just have one thing that's like, okay, if we just do this, then everything works out? That would be really nice. But it's not real. It's not
It's
like,
not real and it's not possible because things are always changing. And so the one answer that works today isn't going to work in a week. And even when we think about, you talked in the beginning about the environment and systems and things like that feel really broken, which contribute to a lot of pain for people, but then that can kind of amplify into a lot of suffering. There's just no way. Like in thinking about the air travel thing, there was a moment on the trip where we were on the plane, and on the plane they announced, hey everyone, we're just waiting to find a captain. And we were like, how did they not, don't you guys have a better system where you can find out that you don't have a captain? Like, didn't you guys know this when we were at home so we didn't have to wait in the airport? But then I think like they probably couldn't have, because why would they want all of us sitting here on this plane? Like, I'm sure they don't want that either. And I'm sure this problem impacts 70 other flights somehow. And so, I think the other thing too is when we're not in this place of mindfulness and awareness and present moment focus, we're really narrowed in with our vantage point of this is the thing right now. This is the only thing that's going on in the world. I'm sitting on this plane and I am delayed, and someone else should have figured out a way to make this not happen. And if they could just do better, then I wouldn't have to be sitting here suffering in this way. But that's really not true, because this isn't the only thing that's happening right now. There are, thousands and millions and billions of other interactions and things moving along in the world that set up those conditions to make it so that moment was the moment that I got. And so being able, even like looking at the bullseye, I think about, the ability to zoom out and remember that we have all of these things going on in our lives, and so do our clients. And so when we show up to sessions, we have to be able to kind of look back and look at the bigger picture, because if we stick to just this one thing that's going on with them, we are going to get really lost in just that. It's gonna enhance our ability to become more polarized with our clients, and then kind of leave the day, which I've had those days where it's like, can my clients just do what I tell them? And if they did, their lives would be better. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. But meanwhile, I can't get myself to watch less reality TV and go to bed earlier at night. And so, you can see these areas where it's like, it's just not that simple,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that last quadrant on the handout there is about embracing change. And I do feel like this is one that I would put myself not close to the bullseye on. It's hard because I get stuck in wanting to find a right answer that's just going to keep working for me and keep working for my clients, and not sort of like resistant to the idea that I'm going to have to be in a constant process of reevaluating how things are working and what to do, and then reassessing what actually is true in reality at that given moment and what to do about that. And I think about it kind of like grocery shopping. I remember when I was in probably college or early adulthood after, I remember, and I started like doing all my own grocery shopping. And I hate grocery shopping. This is like probably one of my least favorite chores to do. And I remember I used to like try to buy everything I needed so I wouldn't have to go back. And then every week, towards the end of the week, I'd be like, oh, like I'm out of food, or I'm out of whatever, or something went bad because I got too much of it and I couldn't use it in time. And I was like resistant to this whole idea that like, actually, this is just a thing that's going to have to keep happening. And I didn't want to accept it. And so I just think like I'm kind of this way in life. Like I want to like do all of the unpleasant task of figuring out how to deal with problems, and then just have that on hand so I never have to deal with it again. But it's not reality. We do have to find new and different ways to encounter the world and interact with the world all the time. And we have to be willing to like keep coming back to the drawing board and understanding, okay, what is the complexity of reality right now that's different than even 20 minutes ago or 2 days ago? And what am I actually working with here and now? And what's going to work and what isn't going to work that I maybe cling to because it worked last time? And being willing to keep working on changing is a hard one. So I do think the ideas, in Linehan's book about like practicing change, like she talks about like changing your routine just for the sake of practicing change. And oftentimes I find this one coming haphazardly to me, like my routine changes without my consent, and then I I'm like, oh, okay, I better get used to this because change is part of life, right? But there are ways in which, if we go towards it and we actually practice it on purpose, I think it can free us up from a lot of that. So sometimes I find myself in sessions like thinking, okay, so I'm kind of used to doing things a certain way, or I have a certain routine in how my session goes, or how I do chain analysis, or the solutions that I typically offer for a certain set of problems. And every once in a while I have to like change it up or do something different or talk differently about it or think differently about it for myself so that I can come in with new and fresh experience of it. It may be the same old problem, but a new and fresh experience of it when I come to session. And even bringing like a playfulness to it, I think is important.
Well, I feel better. How do you feel?
I'm glad. I feel good. I feel more motivated to practice change. That's for sure.
I know. So do I. If anybody has comments or questions about any of the concepts that we went over, feel free to put them in the chat. Yeah, I'm interested to see how this lands for people. I know for myself, the concept of being dialectical, really was new to me when I came into DBT like a long time ago. And it really has changed my life in a lot of ways, right? Like being able to have conversations like this are what facilitate this way of thinking and being in my life. And so when I can take these concepts on in my life, it's such a switch for me to be able to live, or like to catch myself in moments where I'm like, all right, I'm too far on one side. I need to look for what's being left out. And even just the physiological change in that, like I know what it feels like to be polarized in my body. There's like this heart in my heart space. It feels tense and my neck gets really hot. And so I feel the signals of being polarized. And it just feels terrible in your body to have that feeling. It feels terrible in your mind, and it's not good for your spirit. It's like to just be staying in that place. There's no room for growth. There's no room for learning. There's no room for resolve and peace to come after that. And so I say it a lot of the time, especially, when we're gearing up to run a training, I always talk about how DBT has changed my life in so many ways because of concepts like this. And I think it's really easy for that to be painted as a broad stroke that gets missed. Like, oh yeah, DBT, it's changed my life. Yeah. But it really has. And I'm saying that from the perspective as a human who practices DBT. That's separate from my work as a therapist and what I've seen change in my clients' lives. That's just like icing on the cake when clients are doing, and being where I'm at in my career in DBT too, I've been doing this for a while and seeing clients for a long time. And, I'm looking at a card right now that a past client sent, which is funny. It's a pineapple. I don't know that person knows I just got back. I was like, it's a sign, this person knows. But this card was basically this client telling me that like, I haven't seen them in years, and they're just so thankful for the work that we did together in DBT and that it's changed their life and that they couldn't imagine things in any other way. And clients who, came into therapy very hopeless and again, thinking about polarization, so polarized in their pain and their suffering that they thought the only way that they could possibly go on was to think about killing themselves. That these clients are now moving and getting married or getting divorced and getting jobs that they never thought they would get. And it's just like they're looking back at that past version of themselves and thinking, wow, like to get from there to here, these concepts in DBT, I think, are what move people. There's so many people who think that, I think even in the therapy world, like there's so many therapists who think DBT is just like skills group and phone coaching and keeping people out of the hospital. But the richness of it comes from concepts like this. And the D in DBT is dialectical. Like this is the influence, the foundation of the entire type of behavioral therapy. And I think it's one of the things that makes it really special in comparison to other treatment modalities that are still great and effective, but like this richness is just something that's not everywhere else. I'm like getting my own, I like could get emotional about it and talking about it, but yeah, that's how I think about it. When I think dialectics, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Shailene, I don't know if you know, but the chat I think is turned off. Some people, or somebody put in the Q&A that they weren't able to type in the chat.
That's
So
weird.
that
I don't know.
people haven't.
I don't. Try typing in the Q&A, because I'm not
They did.
sure. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, that's so strange. I don't know how to do that. Okay, so somebody asked about getting basic training in DBT as a clinician. Yeah, so this is another thing that I've noticed. I was asking the other day in different Facebook groups about, why people, if they've thought about getting trained in DBT, why haven't they gotten trained in DBT? And one unfortunate thing that happens in the world of DBT is there's a lot of lingo that I think confuses a lot of people. There are a lot of standards, and even within the DBT community, the dialectical therapists themselves will get really polarized in what the right thing to do is. And so unfortunately, I think that confuses a lot of people. So I'll say some things that I think are helpful when considering DBT training and what you need, what might be confusing and things like that. So the first question, if somebody wants to get trained in DBT, there are a bajillion, it feels like a bajillion different trainers and programs and things offering DBT training. The things that you want to look for are that it is generally a 40-hour, at least 5-day training that's going to take you through the 4 modes of DBT. So there are going to be some trainings that just focus on parts of it, like there will be trainings on how to teach the skills, but a DBT training that's going to prepare you to do the full DBT package is generally a 5-day, 40-hour training, because that's how long it takes to cover the main concepts of DBT. There are also the words foundational, intensive, core, the DBT Starter Pack. Like, these are all different terms for different types of trainings. People will think that they can't do DBT unless they have a team. And there's a dialectical answer to that. That's true. So to be doing DBT, you are to be a part of a team, but to get trained in DBT, I mean, anyone can get trained in DBT. Students, people have thought, I have to be licensed to get trained in DBT. That's not true. So you can get trained in DBT without having a team. Once it's time for you to practice DBT, you would get yourself connected with a team member, and a team member only needs to be you and another person. There was a long time where I was in private practice and it was just myself and another person in California, and we would meet virtually to do team. And a lot of people find their teams in going through DBT training. So it's going to be really hard to find a team when you're not trained in the model. You don't really know who else is doing it. And so that's something that people get connected to. In terms of those different terms, Behavior Tech is Marsha Linehan's training company. And it used to be that Behavior Tech was really the only place that clinicians would go to do training, because they were like the only ones out there. But since then, there are plenty of clinicians who are out there doing trainings who have gone through Behavior Tech back in the day, myself, Catherine, who have now gone on to get certified by Linehan Certification Company, and go out and do our own trainings. And so Core, Jumpstart, Starter Pack is the training that Catherine and I offer, and we have one coming up in September. Those are all just different names of trainings to kind of mirror what I think Behavior Tech initially had called the foundational training, which is kind of like the DBT Starter Pack. It's kind of like a core training to give you what you need to go out there and do it. The intensive training, which is a 10-day, 2-part training, that's another term from Behavior Tech. That used to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, but originally the intensive was created for people who were starting up DBT programs. And so they would come to the first half of the training and get what they needed to do, basically individual work with clients and to take them through it. But then they would come back and then they would present really like their program and how their program was embodying the principles of DBT. But as time went on, there were so many people getting trained that it was now that people weren't necessarily starting up these big clinics. They just needed to get caught up to speed to catch up with everyone on their team. And so that's where the foundational style 5-day training came about. And most trainings these days are going to mirror that. I'm going to put our information in the chat and you'll get emails about it. Right now, the Starter Pack will be the training that will give you what you need if you ever want to get certified in DBT. There are not trainings that will get you certified according to Linehan standards. That's a whole process that you have to go through. If you have more questions about that, we can answer them. And we have a whole video that we did on that we could send you guys if you're interested. on the Linehan board certification process. But the main requirement, one of the main requirements to even get started is that you've had at least 40 hours of training. And so the DBT Starter Pack has 32 live hours, and then it has over 10 on-demand hours that go through how to run skills group and all of these other things. And so it's CE approved. It's starting up in September. It's going to be over Zoom. And yeah, registration is open now until I think September 6th. You can see all of the details here. I'm going to put this in the chat for anyone who is interested in that. Let's see. Yeah, and sorry, I don't know why the chat's not working. I imagine it's a setting that was set incorrectly, but the Q&A feature does work if you want to pop questions in there. And then I'll just say along with that, I think another barrier that I've, talked to clinicians about recently coming up around getting trained in DBT is just, it's expensive and it's a big commitment. And I agree. I think it is, there's a lot that goes into the trainings. And so it's hard to find trainings that are, and it's a 32-hour, I mean, it's pretty intensive. Catherine and I do try to make the training as accessible as possible. So if there's like payment plans or things like that that people need, you can just email us and we're happy to see what we can do to try and help you get into the training. Trying to think if there were other things that came up when people talked about barriers, but the language was one. One was that people felt really overwhelmed. Like, so there was somebody who went through the training and then just felt like there were so many things to follow that they didn't know what to do with it. And I would say that, again, I could see the truth in that and how that would be the case. I think the other side of it too is also knowing that when you get trained in DBT, for myself, one of the bonuses is that, there's always new stuff to learn. Like I don't think there's really ever a time where someone's arrived and they're like, okay, I've got it. Like there are moments when I feel in session, like I'm like, okay, I totally got this. I nailed that, and I have the structure of it. I have the tools of it, and I know how to use the tools really well. But that's one of the reasons, going to your consultation team is so important, is to keep you in the game with doing a treatment protocol that has so many different pieces to it and can feel really complex. While at the same time, I think just like any skill, over learning it and being committed to it and being intentional about it is what helps you do it more naturally. So it doesn't feel like you're sitting in session trying to check these boxes off around like, did I get this right? Did I do this thing? That's not really what it's about. But I think when you're learning it, just like anything else, it feels a bit clunky. Kind of like, like learning a new language. Yeah.
For me on the guitar, it's not a good, that's a good word for it.
Well, not yet. You got to keep going. And then naturally you'll just be serenading us all.
Someday.
Actually, that's another reason to come to training. Catherine has actually sang in trainings before, you sang the mindfulness song. You just never know what you'll get in them, which is a great plug for Catherine and I. We like to think we're very entertaining. You can sing songs in there. Just, you don't know what you'll get. It's a nice time.
Who knows?
Yeah, I've done dances and trainings before too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Shouldn't have said that because I don't want to do it again now that I'm thinking about it out loud. But all right. Anything else to say, Catherine, before we wrap up? We're like just at the end of time here.
No, I just wish you all well. Just wish you well.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming and tuning in. And we, again, we'll send out the handout and hopefully we'll see everyone at a training soon. Take care, everybody.
Take care.